Peter, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
Yeah, I'd love to get into prayer today. So let's start a little bit with your prayer life. How did you? I know a lot of people. I don't know your journey with Jesus, but a lot of people either awaken to prayer right away with their journey to Jesus, or sometimes it's a different epiphany somewhere along the way, like, oh, I forgot that we need to step into this. What's your journey with Jesus and prayer and your own prayer life?
Yeah, I would say I found odd comfort from the fact that when you look at the vast majority of leaders and pastors, the vast majority would say that they are dissatisfied with their prayer life. And there's this gap between what we know to be true and then what we actually live as if it were true. And perhaps the gap is nowhere greater than when it comes to prayer, that we would say, what an incredible gift that we have to be able to commune with God Almighty in prayer. What an absolute amazing gift. And then the disconnect with that actually being woven in. And, really for me, the moment when I first realized I had a prayer problem was when we were on a day of prayer and we were given this time and we were given this space. And I just couldn't slow my mind down. I couldn't actually pray because my mind was just going so fast. And so, really, this book, this process, it has been an absolute gift to dive much deeper into the habits, the practices of prayer. And I believe it is possible to make progress. I believe it is possible to narrow that gap between what we say and what we do, and to find not just the duty of prayer, but to discover a great delight in it. So I would say that's the journey that I've been on, and really working on the book with Ryan and Cameron and Jill has just been an incredible gift in my own life, and understanding much greater depths in the beauty of prayer.
Mm. Well, so if you started to, like, your mind wouldn't slow down in that time, what were some of the ways that you were able to start to slow your mind down so you could start to engage in prayer?
Yeah, and so really the whole kind of writing process, we were trying to find leaders who pray, leaders that actually understand and practice prayer. And in some ways, just emulating, just following their example has
Mm,
been the gift. And I find it really interesting that the disciples came to Jesus, and what was their question?
yeah.
They said, Lord, teach
Teach
us
us
how
how
to
to pray.
pray. Exactly. And so I feel like that's the journey that we've been on. Teach us how to pray. And, some of the things that are so simple, but have had an impact on my life is, first of all, just the exploration of posture, the way that physical posture is connected to our prayer life. And if our prayer posture is lying down, head on the pillow, with the lights out, that might not be the best place for deep, significant prayer. I'm not saying that's not the right time to pray. It certainly is. But if that's the extent, that's going to have an impact on our prayer life. And what we learn from individuals around the world is some real simple habits and practices that can align our body to shape our heart and to engage in more meaningful prayer. So that's one super practical way that we've just had fun experimenting, and looking at the connection between our physical posture and our prayer life, and found much greater depth and attention as a result.
It is interesting that we don't really think about physical posture very much. As somebody who trains missionaries, was a missionary myself around the world, one of the big things of brand new believers is teach us how to pray. And I find a lot of missionaries just say, oh, you just talk to God. It's easy. But Jesus didn't do that with the Lord's Prayer, right? He said, here's a recited prayer that you could pray. You could go through these steps, and it's really helpful for people. What's one posture that has helped you, or a posture that you found while interviewing some of these leaders with prayer that they have done that you go, oh, I want to start to engage in that posture because I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, so just the one that comes to mind that we heard, and whenever we heard themes from different individuals from around the world, our ears perked up when there were different practices. And so just real simple. The two that I found most helpful, one was Justin Whitmore Early talked
Mm-hmm.
about how every day he just got in the habit, first thing, before even the eyes are fully open, uh, getting down on his knees and starting the day there, and then ending the day in the same way. And that does something to the heart. And I found the same thing to be true with our friends in the Philippines that we had the privilege of learning with. But similarly, they would have their body and they'd have these prayer mats, and that was how they started. So that was one just real simple, real practical. But throughout the history, followers of Jesus have had this posture of saying, we want to make sure that we are, yeah, there's a level of humility, there's a level of attentiveness that happens with that. So that's one simple one. And then the other one is just the exploration of even simple hand postures. We found several individuals that would start with just palms up, hands open, and saying, Lord, here I am. Fill me, use me. And then ending the prayer with turning the hands over and saying, the things that I'm carrying, the burdens that I have, I release them to you as a way of framing the prayers. And again, just small examples, but it was fun to experiment and to understand
Yeah.
this connection. Our posture, it does impact our prayer life.
Yeah, it does. I was meeting with my spiritual director earlier today, and I think last night went into a place of frenzy and chaos, and I needed peace and be grounded with the peace of Jesus, and I couldn't find it. I I wasn't doing very well last night. So I was asking, how do I become grounded? And one of the ways, he just asked me, okay, just ask the Lord, where do you find peace in your body? And the first thing that came to my mind was that I needed to be on my knees. Like
Hmm.
peace comes on my knees. And it felt like that posture of like kneeling before the Lord is the thing that's going to bring peace to the situation that I find myself in, or any situation that I need to get there, to get to that posture. And so bringing that up, that posture of being on our knees is really, I think, important, even individually for me to dive into and say, okay, God, here's my posture. Now start to do this. And then that open hand posture and then releasing things back to the Lord. My question for you, like as you interact and work throughout the world, and I know that with Hope International, there's probably a lot of crises and difficult things on the ground everywhere, and you're going to have to do that posture, like receive from the Lord and then release it to Him. Is there a specific moment that you could think of as you're leading in a different crisis moment where you're practically, or just like, this is the posture that I'm receiving from Him, then I'm releasing it, and what effect did that have?
Hmm. Yeah, and thanks so much for sharing your personal
Mm,
experience, even recently with last night and today. Thank you. Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. Yeah. And over the last couple of years, it certainly seems like there have been more opportunities than ever before
yeah.
to feel overwhelmed. And isn't that a great invitation into prayer? But some of the specific moments for us, we were founded as an organization partnering with a church in Zaporozhye, Ukraine. And Zaporozhye, where Hope International was founded, made the headlines because that is not far away from where a lot of the fighting with Russia's invasion into Ukraine, and there was we saw on the news about the power plant that was there and the fighting that was all around there, and that is not just a city. That's where our friends are. That's where our
Mm,
colleagues are. That's where the families that we serve are. And yeah, that was a moment where you literally, like, you can't control the situation. You do
yeah.
everything you do to care for the staff, to figure out how we're going to care for the families that we serve, and even now to figure out how do we rebuild and invest in entrepreneurs in Ukraine and help them rebuild their nation. But there is so much that feels completely out of control. And isn't it an amazing gift to have in those moments of feeling overwhelmed, feeling like it is beyond you to
Mm,
know what to do, and to go to the one who is wise enough, who who is full of so much love and so much grace
Yeah.
and is active in those places, and just simply to say, we found the power of some short prayers over the last couple of years, but Lord help,
Yeah.
Lord save, Lord deliver, Lord rescue, and just praying for our friends and our colleagues, and finding again that odd sense of sometimes the situation doesn't immediately change, but you can have a little bit more of a release
Yeah.
when you remember who it is that you're speaking to.
Mm. I think it's really hard when you're at a place where you're leading something and you're trying to give gravity and leadership to a situation where you don't have control. That's a really hard place to be as a leader. And one of the things that I worry about when we talk about different postures of leadership or how to lead is that, especially, in this book, the worry that I have is that prayer is going to be another leadership hack. We're going to, just utilize this so that we can be successful in our own right, that we could lift up our own selves and go, I'm just going to use prayer for my own organization or my own leadership. How can we avoid that temptation of just trying to make it a new hack for us and just be in the presence of the Lord and do it for prayer's sake, and then fruit comes because of that?
That is so good. I so appreciate you doing that. And yeah, if this is a tool, a trick, a technique,
Yeah.
a hack that ultimately look at how it benefits me, we have lost the very beginning point of remembering who we're speaking to, remembering whose presence we are entering into in
Yeah.
this incredible mystery of prayer. And I love how in the book of Jeremiah, there's this phrase, Jeremiah chapter 17, and it really answers that question so clearly. But it has this line where it says, it actually says it in really strong words. It says, "Cursed are those who rely on human strength, whose hearts turn away from the
Mm.
Lord." And it's possible in leadership, even in our prayer, to have it be very self serving, very
Yeah.
self seeking. This is what I want. This is what I need.
Yeah.
This is the way I can manipulate these circumstances for my own good, and to try and engineer our success and use the tool or trick of prayer in the process. But then Jeremiah 17 goes on it, but blessed are those whose hope in the Lord have made the Lord their hope and confidence. And I think that's really what this comes down to. At
Yeah.
the very beginning, at the very end, is this invitation to remember who it is that we are speaking with, to come to the end of our limits, the end of our ability, and to truly want God's will more than our own.
Yeah.
And again, I find that just opens up the heart,
Mm.
opens up the hands, and it's less about what I want, and much more about God. Oh, we need you. It's
Yeah.
so interesting. One of the interviews was with Johnny Erickson Tata, and that was a incredible privilege to have time to learn from her. But she said a lot of people over the years have come to her and asked for very specific prayers for healing. And she says, my prayers for healing or relief from this incredible pain, I'm still praying that. It has not come, but she said, I will pray for that, but I'm going to spend at least 80% of the prayer time praying not just for the issue, but that God might be at work in the midst of it. And I thought that to be such an interesting perspective to say, yeah, of course, we're going to pray for the things that are on our hearts, but are we also going to pray with a higher degree of trust, a greater degree of confidence that even in incredible difficulty, God is still at work? And
Mm.
that conversation with her, that's one of the ones that just has been resonating,
Wow.
even about the way that we pray and what we pray for. And it
Mm.
has far less to do with specific answers to what I want
Yeah.
and much more. God, you're at work. Your ways are best. Show me, lead me, teach me, and help me to have the courage to obey.
Mm. I think we often think that, prayer is talking to God, but we often forget about the listening part. And I think that what she's talking about in the midst of real difficult circumstances that are probably not going to change, and we're walking with them, but the presence of God with us is so important. and knowing that he's there, either through hearing his voice or just feeling his presence. How then, in those difficult times, do we get to a place where we're not just petitioning God and saying, help, 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 do this, but okay, what do you want in this situation, Lord? What are you saying in this situation? Or how can I hear you? Please, speak in this way, be present here. How could we move our posture from petition to listening and being with God in prayer?
Yeah, isn't it interesting that when the disciples asked Jesus, Lord, teach us to pray, he gave some specific words, and those words are incredibly powerful. And what is one of the ones in there? Your will be done.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge piece of this is aligning not just our desires, but to have them shaped, to have them formed by a desire to see, Lord, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And
Mm,
for that to be what drives us, for that to be the vision that we are going
yeah.
after, for that to be the primary prayer.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of you going into a new country with hope and saying, God, what is your will in this country? We want your will to be done here. And that what are some of the things that opened up because you are willing to say, God, we want your kingdom to be here, to be unveiled to these people. How do you want to go about doing that?
Yeah, and I'm so thankful for Ruth Haley Barton. She wrote a book called Pursuing God's Will Together.
Yeah.
And in that book, she gives a great blueprint for how to do this. And in many ways, there's some similarity between that of what is not just the individual, but what is the corporate discernment process. And I think about the recent country that we launched into is in West Africa. It's Benin. And this is a place, it's a region that we had not been in before. And up until the moment that we presented to the board of directors, there were several countries that we thought were great options, and to go through that discernment process, to go through that. And yes, you want to gather the facts. Yes, you want to do the research. You want to look for where are those invitations. And then at the end, before the decision is made, is there time? Is there space to not do a little prayer pixie dust that you sprinkle on the top,
Yeah.
but to actually engage in the listening process? And I'm so
Mm,
thankful our board chair puts this into practice. And just before the decisions are made, without fail,
mm,
pause. Let's stop. Let's listen before any decision is made.
mm. That's so good to be able to have that corporate discernment process, because I think, well, if you're looking, the nice thing that you guys did is you interviewed people from all over the world, global leaders, and saying, "Here, teach us how to pray. What does it look like?" I often think because, in the West, I'm sitting here in Kansas City, you're sitting in the West as well. What is it? We think things through individually. It's an individualistic culture that we live in. We think that it's our personal prayer time, but that corporate discernment process is not just individual. What does it look like then to hold hands together in prayer? Like, how do we do that with one another? And it's not just, you know, our own individual prayer time.
It's really interesting. If you type into Google about prayer, what are the images that come up? It is all individual, like
Yeah,
almost all. The very way that we think about prayer is a individual activity. And yet, that is not necessarily the way that it is thought about, seen, or experienced corporately. And in some ways, in our culture, it can feel a little bit awkward. I don't know who's going to speak, and I'm more of an introvert. I don't know if I really want to share. And I think in those settings, there's two maybe recommendations. One is start small. Maybe instead of finding a whole room full of people, maybe it's just one or two people, but it is powerful when you pray with and in agreement with another person. And then maybe if it's a little bit of a larger setting, we've really enjoyed using Every Moment Holy, and that gives language
yeah,
around prayers and different events and different prompts. And maybe it's more using some of the prayers of someone else to
Yeah.
guide. And then you're praying in agreement with words that have been written and prayed by others. So there's just, I guess that to me is like one of the biggest takeaways. There's so much more to explore. Regardless of where you are in your prayer journey,
Mm.
there's so much more depth. There's
Yeah.
so much more to explore, and yeah, again, that's been the great joy. Is let's learn from others. Let's
Mm.
learn from praying leaders. Let's learn from other practices that might be outside of just what I am comfortable with, and experiment.
Mm.
And my experience, our experience, was that you might discover some new depth in your enjoyment and experience of this
Mm.
incredible gift of prayer.
Mm. What do you think? I've heard I was talking to somebody that has written a number of books, and he said my least successful books are the ones about prayer.
I don't want to hear that when we're about to release a book on prayer.
Well, but I but it's the foundation is like one of the most important things. But I'm not talking about the success of your book or not. Like we're gonna get people to be able to pray, but I think a lot of people think that prayer, I don't know, isn't very important. I mean, as anecdotally, like talking about, you know, I'm not going to buy a book on prayer. Why? It just means talking to God. Why do you think it's important for us to dive deep into this, to say grow in our depth of our enjoyment and our love of prayer, of being with the one who created us, which is what it is. Like, wow, I get to be in the presence of God, which is the coolest thing ever. It's awesome. But why do you think that I hopefully things are changing in this world? I mean, we're going through a lot of crazy times. So hopefully we're going to get back into a place of, hey, I need to rely on God. But why do you think that we really need to dig into this now? Why is it so important?
Yeah, and I would say to those people that when they think about their prayer life, they are fully satisfied. They are fully enjoying it. They don't need the book on that. But for the others, that at least statistically is a significant portion that say, "Oh, I want to grow in this area." I resonate every time I read those words of the disciples. Lord, teach us to pray. Like that.
Yeah.
That resonates with me
Mhm.
so much. For those individuals, I think
Mm.
we have a lot to learn from the global church. I think
Yeah.
we have a lot to look from the historical church, and I think we have a lot to learn from leaders that have figured out how to
Mm.
build cultures of prayer. So
Mm.
I would say that's it. The question of why now, I think the other component that we are seeing is we are living in a distracted age. We are
Mhm.
living in a time that our attention is decreasing, and our
Mm.
ability to scroll without end, to
Yeah.
fill every moment of time with some sort, I think that that leaves our soul malnourished. And so if
Mm.
we're experiencing that or we're seeing that, I think the question is, so how do we break that? How do we find greater depth? How do we find a way
Mhm.
of rediscovering depth and significance in prayer? And again, part of the deal is I don't think that
Mm.
is always experienced alone in 1 minute distracted prayers. I think
Yeah.
there's a benefit in slowing down our minds, slowing
Mm.
down our hearts, and maybe some of the one of the chapters on the ability to retreat. Isn't it amazing that Jesus, with limited time to do all
Yeah.
that he kept
Yeah.
disappearing, he kept pulling
Mm.
away. And if that is true for Jesus, maybe
Yeah.
it's true for us. And if we have never pulled away to have devoted, focused, undistracted time, if we can't remember the last time that we had a moment like that, wouldn't it be great to experiment?
Mm.
Wouldn't it be great to try it out? And so I think that's part of the issue now is
Mm.
I just in my own life, distracted, like internal RPMs too
Yeah.
high, it was having an impact on my soul
Yeah.
and slowing down. And again, I think prayer is this unbelievable gift with so much more depth to explore.
Mm.
And my guess is it might have a really transformational impact on
Yes.
you and on the relationships and on the way that you lead.
Mhm. I think so too, and I think one of the things that I believe is that if we want to grow a culture or grow a culture of prayer in the places where we lead, it often comes through a person that is carrying that presence of whatever culture that you want to impart. You're imparting culture to other people. I don't think that, hey, we have a value of prayer, just writing it down without carrying it and living it out ourselves. It's not going to transform the rest of the organization that we're leading. So, what are some of the rhythms that we can engage in to start then to transform the entire culture to grow in rhythms of prayer and to create a culture of prayer?
Yeah. So one of the people that we interviewed for the book, his name is David, and he was doing a lot to study prayer and to try and find a way of learning about prayer. And he had this firm conviction: you got to model before you multiply. And that changed everything. It was him learning to practice in a way and then to multiply.
Mm,
And in a similar way, that's what we saw, that's what we experienced, is the leaders that have created cultures of prayer, they're not afraid to go first to
yeah.
say, let me change the way that I pray. Let's understand what that looks like, and then in a very authentic way to invite others into that journey of
Yeah.
that. And so all kinds of great examples of what that looks like in the nonprofit and the for-profit, all kinds of great examples. But I remember visiting the International Justice Mission and finding it eerily quiet every day at 8:30 because that's when they shut everything down to pray. And Gary Haugen, founder, said essentially, how could we think that we'll be able to do this global work combating human trafficking if we do not find time to stop and pray? This mission is beyond our ability. And in a similar way with Hope International, there's something beautiful and powerful. We don't do it at 8:30, we do it at 11:30, but like literally just stopping, ceasing,
Mm,
and gathering to
mm,
pray together for what's going on around the world, for what's going on in our lives, and to just be reminded that this mission that we're going after,
mm,
it is impossible without God's incredible grace and divine intervention.
mm. Then, I mean, I think it's to. I want to dive even a little bit deeper of like modeling and then multiplying out. So we're modeling, and now you're getting some staff to be able to do it. We're going to pause. We're going to do that. This is our rhythm, a daily rhythm that we're going to stop at 11:30, and we're going to do that. So if you're whatever, maybe Benin or whatever country that you're in, and you have the disciples that you're working with or people, so how then does it multiply out to the people that are utilizing the savings bank that you're doing, that are helping to getting microfinancing loans and starting their own businesses and coming out of poverty? Is there a way that that starts to multiply out even to the disciples, the people that are utilizing and your services and the people that you engage with and work with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it almost as this circle where it is, when I spend time with families around the world and you get to pray with them, and it's not just one way. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, we want to be praying for our team and for the families that we serve, but then to also have them pray for you. Oh, it is so humbling and
Yeah.
powerful on that. And there is such a beautiful, like, we're coming together in front of God Almighty as brothers and sisters, linking arm in arm.
Mm,
There is no other dynamic other than coming together. And yeah, so I think about that. But in the places that we serve around the world, operationally, the way that it works is we go through these 5 Ws every time a group gathers. So we're trying to, you know, the core mission is about investing in the dreams of families as we proclaim and live the gospel. So
mm,
we are investing in entrepreneurs. We're helping them start or expand small businesses, and we're helping them grow closer to Christ as they go about this work. And so when the groups gather, and we have now we've served 2.7 million families that have been either receiving a savings account or been able to invest together or receive a loan. And every time they gather together, they go through 5 W's. So the 5 W's are welcome, worship, word, work, and wrap up. And there's something amazing that if you look at that, one of them is about the financial transaction and saving and investing. That's the work portion. But the other portions are about this experience together and the welcome and the worship. This is a time in our words, in our prayers, and in our song. We start every gathering inviting God's presence in, because we serve a God of hope, and in the communities we serve in, which is real. I mean, it's extreme poverty.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to do this work without
Mm,
that hope that is rooted in the gospel. So that's how we start. We start with prayer, and we start with worship, and we start with checking in. How are we doing? And the opportunity to really, yeah, have prayer as a foundational component of this work. So it's not just about investing in dreams from the financial capital. It's so much more than that. And the relationships and
mm,
prayer plays a significant role in that as well.
mm. That's really good, and I think that's really helpful that we're investing in a holistic model of life, that there's, the financial gain and the finances and out of poverty, but we're also there's poverty of, our spiritual lives as well that we want to invest in, and I'm sure there's poverty of our, their familiar lives and our community lives that you're trying to build people together and grow together. So there's all sorts of growing up into that. And I think prayer is essential in that leading of it and multiplying it out. That was a great example. Well done. That's awesome.
Nice.
That's good. Uh, as you went through this book and started to talk through leaders, for you, what really resonated? Like, is there a chapter in there that's like, oh, that's that's Peter's chapter. This is the thing that I really gravitated towards, or the leader that I spoke to that I was like, "Oh, I can't stop thinking about that." That's so good.
Yeah. Oh, there are so many in that. I already referenced it briefly, but I don't know if I captured it in the way that I was just talking, but there was a joy in Johnny Erickson Tata. Like there was a joy and there was a depth, and her suffering
Mm,
and scripture shaped her prayer life in a way that I can't stop thinking about it. I just can't. There is so much more. I went back and I read some other uh, of her books, and I read them with new voice in my ears and a new perspective in that. So that's the one that stands out. I think the other one, there was several leaders from around the world that are just living in unimaginably complex situations, and there was a joy that defied circumstance in several of them. And the line that just stood out several times was essentially getting your heart happy in the Lord, and
mm,
actually finding your soul satisfaction, finding your contentment, finding your peace in your relationship with the one who made you, the one who knows you, the
mm,
one who saves you, and then how that just changes how you go about the day.
mm,
That changes the way you experience disappointment because you've
mm,
already experienced the delight of your heavenly Father. And I don't know, that idea of
mm.
finding prayer not as drudgery, but delight. And I'm not there yet, but I have had moments while we've been working on this book and trying some things that I think for the first time in my life I experienced delight in prayer.
Wow.
And that was new. I want more of that.
That's so good. And I think that's the thing that people I often am surprised that the most joyful people are the ones that have suffered. And why do you think that is?
Hmm. That is beyond my pay grade on that one. I, the only thing that comes to mind is when you have the distractions peeled away, and when you actually get to experience grace and peace that defies circumstance.
Mm,
I think there is a different level of depth and experience that you have in that moment. So I think
mm,
suffering, perhaps unlike anything else, causes us to say we can't save ourselves. We
mm,
can't. We can't fix what is broken. But there's one who delights in being present in that moment. And I think that's what they've experienced. They've
Yeah.
experienced the letting go of the illusions, of the shadows, and holding on to that which is real and true life.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, the presence of Jesus in our lives, of just being with us in
Yes.
the midst of everything and knowing that he is faithful to be with us. I think it's such a man, it's such a crucial piece and moment that I can't do anything apart from the Lord now. I think that's part of it. It's like I can't do anything else except for be with Jesus with
Yes.
me. And so that's, I mean, that's huge. I mean, we have, unimaginable suffering. The founders of the missions organization that I help run, All Nations, the founder, Floyd McClung was, in the hospital for 5 years before he passed away, like trapped in his body. His wife, Sally, gone through cancer for many years, but Sally going through that with her husband, going through cancer treatment after cancer treatment and surviving, but can't really getting out of her house. She has probably the biggest joy that I've ever seen, because
Mm.
and it comes through in her communication and her writing, and she just delights in being with the Lord. It's tremendous to be able to see people and to say, okay, I want some of that, but I don't know if I want that suffering piece, but I want some of that
Yeah.
joy. Um, but we have a suffering servant. We have Jesus who suffered for us. So suffering is such a key to our life with Christ that we don't often want to engage in, but we do get the presence of Jesus when we do suffer, which is good because I'm not asking for
Right.
suffering, but but it's not what I want to experience. But I think that we're going to get Jesus if we do. If you can, oh, Peter, are you there?
I am.
Oh, there you are. Okay. If you could tell the listener here or your reader one thing, what would you want them to get out of this? What would you want them to step away from, and how would their life be transformed because of this?
Yeah, I guess maybe it's just that simple idea of it is possible to make progress, like real, meaningful
Mm,
progress in your prayer life. And so I would just say, like, try it for a month, try some new habits, try some new practices. And we tried to create as many tools as we could because this is not just about a book. We are thrilled to imagine what might happen if there was a movement in our day, in our time, of people that rediscovered this incredible, incredible gift of prayer. So I'd say
mm,
try it for a month. And if you need some help, there's a real simple 21-day kind of prayer guide that we have to help people start on this journey. And I would just say try it, experiment with it, and you might just, yeah, be surprised at how much it
mm.
impacts you.
I think it's really helpful. Like every chapter, you got practical ways to pray and to engage, and practical steps. And I'm so thankful for that because oftentimes you get a prayer book, you get something, and it's very inspiring, and then you're like, I can't enter into that. I can't do that. That's not me. But you have these steps that you say, enter into this practice and see how it fits, and see how it could work for you, and then you keep going through those chapters, and you've created a lot more. So leadwithprayer.com, you have a lot more resources on there for people to enter into. And I think that's really going to benefit a tremendous amount of people. And I know that prayer resources have been incredibly helpful for millions of people around the world. And I just pray that this also is one of those resources that many people benefit from, step into, start to pray, because when we pray and God leads, we hear from him, we do what he says, incredible things are going to happen. We're going to see transformation happen all over the world. Before I get into two last questions that I like to ask, I'd love to ask for you, what is exciting with Something in Hope International? What are you really excited about right now of what Hope is doing around the world?
Yeah, the thing that comes immediately to mind is so we've been around for 26, 27 years as an organization and really had this area of focus. We're going to do a small number of things and we're going to try to do it really well. And those two things are church-centered savings groups and then microfinance institutions. And as we've been doing that, we've had a number of other organizations that have reached out and said, we want to figure out how we can include some sort of economic development component. And our response in the past was just to say, here's our what we've developed. Go for it. We're cheering for you. And a few years ago, we started a little bit different of saying, well, what if we could actually do more with that? What if we could actually have a part of hope to train and equip other organizations,
Mm,
still with this posture of open-handedness? And so we call it Savings Group Multiply. And we've been training and partnering with other organizations,
mm,
and it has been awesome to see the kind of scale and impact in a short amount of time, and really just these friendships grow with other
mm,
organizations that were doing important missions work or church planning, but now to have another tool that they can use to address extreme poverty. So that's been fun. Just the partnership, the open handedness,
mm,
and just this reminder yeah,
mm,
we are part of a bigger mission that extends beyond the bounds of any one organization.
mm.
And if we
Yeah.
can leverage, if we can take what we've learned in the models, train and equip other organizations, that's
Mm,
just going to be much more kingdom impact as a
mm.
result.
Yeah, and it's gonna have a lot. I'm just gonna just anecdotally in our organization, we have a piece we call Pioneer Business Planting, where we're helping people plant businesses and churches among unreached people groups, and that has really the most fruitful thing that we're doing right now around the world is through that. And
It's
so
great.
bringing both of those things together has been crucial. So I would highly recommend people check that out so that you could train them, help them in a way. I think it's extremely beneficial and fruitful as you're bringing a holistic view of what it looks like to bring up a community together in a way that looks like the kingdom. It's amazing. So, Peter, if you could go back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Oh, I would just say, don't forget that in all of the work, all of the striving, uh, don't forget prayer as a critical component of all of it. Be centered, be rooted in prayer. Wish I didn't have to wait till this point discover some of the beauty of that. So, I mean,
Mm,
that obviously is top of mind based on what we've just been talking
yeah.
about. But I sincerely mean that. I think that would have made a difference. I know that would have made a difference in the way that I lead and serve. And yeah,
Awesome. Anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
I I have been, this is so random, but it's the first thing that came to mind. I got to meet someone named Creek Stewart, and he is a survivalist. And I have had so much fun checking out his videos online. And I think part of the fascination with that is with a survivalist, this is someone who is getting out into nature with a very small number of things. And I think that in this world that we live in, that is so tech addicted, the ability to let go, enjoy this world, maybe connects to our conversation here.
Yeah.
But I have just been so interested in getting into nature, experiencing things that you don't see if you are looking at a screen. And and so that's what we've had fun with as a family, watching videos of Creek Stewart and survival skills that if I happen to be dropped off in a remote island, I'd be able to survive a little bit longer as a result of what we've been experiencing with him. That's the first thing that came to mind.
That's awesome. Creek Stewart. All right. I got to check him out. Check out his videos. That should be a lot of fun. How can people connect with you? Where would you like to point people to? How can people go out and get your book?
Yeah, so hopeinternational.org for anything related to what we were just talking about, related to the savings group and global missions on that side. And then with the book, if you go with leadwithprayer.com, that's the best way to go. And again, all of the prayer tools are available there as well. So leadwithprayer.com. And personally, if you go to Peter K. Greer, that's where I am on all the socials, but peterkgreer.com if you want to connect with me. And if I can help in any way, I would love to try and do it.
Awesome. Peter, thank you so much for this conversation. to really dive deep in what it looks like to lead with prayer, that we could have joy in suffering, that we could experience the presence of Jesus in our lives, that we could go and have helpful postures like being on our knees or opening our hands, releasing things to the Lord, that through crisis and difficulty that we could pray, that we could grow up and have a prayer culture that we can model and then multiply it out, not just with our staff, but also with the people that we work with all around the world through what we're doing. So thank you for this conversation. I think it was enlightening and helpful. There's practicals in it. So it was well done. I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks.